Let's head to Athens. We got to talk Georgia recruiting right now. First home game, it was back. They're back in Athens. The Dogs hosted a couple flip targets. One of the most important ones was Tennessee commitment, edge C.J. Gass. Now, I remember when he made his commitment just about 5 or 6 weeks ago. It was a really tough decision to leave the state of Georgia and pick Tennessee. Now he's back in Athens. Tell me, is this a significant movement?
Well, I think it's big for Georgia. It shows that they're still alive. I think it was, will he show up on campus? And he did. And so that's the first step. Communication remains with Glenn Schumann, Coach Chidera, Uzo Duribe. There were times down the stretch where I thought he was still going to end up at Georgia. Tennessee's done a fantastic job in this recruitment as well. I could certainly see him sticking with the Vols. They're playing at a high level defensively right now under Coach Tim Banks and company. But Georgia, they had some big flips at the end of last cycle, getting KJ Bolden away from Florida State. He's that level of a target for Georgia here in this cycle.
All right. And now he's not the only flip target left. But before we get to the next flip target, I want to talk about a prospect that it was a surprise. Rashad Johnson flipped his commitment just about 2 hours before kickoff. Last weekend, it was Elijah Melendez that did it. This weekend, it was Rashad Johnson. He flips his commitment from Georgia to Texas A&M. So where does Georgia turn from here? I got a couple ideas. You can tell me if I'm right or wrong. Georgia Tech safety commit, Rashawn Dinkins. He's a name. Or what about Tay Harris? I know he was at the Clemson-Georgia game as a Clemson recruit, but Georgia's been involved with him in the past. Could you see them pursuing either one of these to fill the void left by Rashad Johnson?
Well, they've been keeping Tay Harris warm even before Tom decommitted from Georgia, and they fought to keep Rashad Johnson in the fold. He visited Texas A&M for their opener against Notre Dame, but Georgia tried to keep him in. He was a take. Dinkins is someone that's emerging with a strong senior year, committed to Georgia Tech. He's a guy that they're starting to hit the gas on. Senior evals will be big for this Georgia staff, so we'll see who else they go after. And they could go after a guy that's high profile, committed elsewhere. I mean, again, Georgia's not one of those programs that typically wins the day-to-day of recruiting. I mean, they got some aces on the staff that are really good. Coach Duribe comes to mind. Coach David Cooper is one of the best off-field guys in the business. But a lot of Georgia's recruiting is done by saying, we win a lot of games, we get you drafted very high. And then when guys visit, they get around the players on the team and they feel an outstanding culture. Players love playing at Georgia and they love having that G on their chest and they love talking about it. So maybe Georgia's not out recruiting someone Monday through Friday, but when they get a kid on campus and get them around their players are some of the best salesmen for why you should come to Georgia. And if you are uber competitive, that's the place for you. And that's why we're able to see them win out so often on the trail with the right guys. And they could go out and flip someone we're not talking about right now that's made up of that DNA.
All right, let's move to the defensive line where Georgia had another flip target on campus. That's defensive tackle, committed to Florida, Jeremiah McLeod. What are you hearing on McLeod? Because there's been a lot of Florida-Georgia battles, and the Bulldogs usually come out on top on these. So McLeod committed to the Gators but showed up in Athens this weekend.
Yeah, he said Georgia fits him. I think that he's a guy that's rising up Georgia's board. I could see him in the Bulldogs class. He had a great visit. Trey Scott's another one of those top recruiters that Georgia has of building connections with their top D-line targets. He does a fantastic job. He really enjoyed being around Trey Scott. So as Georgia works on the 2 5-star defensive linemen, Justice Terry and Elijah Griffin, the number 1s and number 2 defensive linemen in the country from in-state, you also have Kevin Wynn committed to Florida State, and you have Jeremiah here. I could see all 4 of them in Georgia's class when all said and done. And you already know that I'm still predicting Georgia to finish with On3's number 1 ranked recruiting class. They got to pull these recruitments out, but the meat is on the bone for them to rise from 4 to number 1 when all said and done.
All right, now on 300 running back Usman Kroma, he attended the Georgia game, although he's trending heavily to Auburn. Last weekend, he watched the Tigers win. This weekend, he was in Athens. What's going on with Usman Kroma?
Well, this recruitment's been fluid, and there's been some teams that have been hot at different times. Florida State's another that has had their time in the sun with Kroma. I'm still rocking with Auburn, but you and I both know and have talked about it in the past. If Georgia's turning it up, you never count them
Watch
out.
out.
And so they certainly could go out there and land Chroma. What would be interesting is that Georgia's in the thick of it for another in-state running back that they like, Shane Marshall, who's committed to Minnesota. Shane's going to visit for the Auburn game. He's got an official visit locked in. He's a senior riser type player that's got a lot of trait that Georgia's in the mix for. They already have Bo Walker committed. Is it Shane Marshall, who we know they have the gas on, or is it Chroma, who there's just been a lot of flirting from both sides. Let's see how real it ultimately gets.
All right. Now, there was a major 2026 target on campus that's committed to South Carolina. The number 2 linebacker in America, Rodney Colton, was in Athens over the weekend. Pretty significant trip.
I think so. I mean, it's early in his process. Him coming off the board early for Shane Beamer and company is big, but they knew they were going to have to fight to keep him. He's been to Georgia several times. This was his latest experience, and he loves the way they play, loves the style. Said that Georgia's always going to remain in his top, so I don't get the sense that he's shutting the door on the Bulldogs anytime soon.
All right, Georgia fans, talk to us. Let us know, comment section below, how we feeling about recruiting in 2025.